So we're gonna do the same thing as on Tuesday. We're gonna go into REPL. We're gonna click on My REPLs. We're gonna hit New REPL, that green button, and then we're gonna open a new Java REPL. What's the first thing I type? Public static void main string brackets args. Okay, then we're gonna pop in here system.out.println hello world. You know, the same program we've written like 40 times by now. Hit run, and you got a hello world program. Today we're going to learn about functions. Functions are a tool in programming. They give us a few advantages. One is just clarity. They can make things easier to look at. Two is they make code reuse easier. And a third really strong one is it lets you avoid repeating yourself. That's all really abstract. Let me change this code to have another function in it. As it's written right now, there is one function, the main function. Also in Java, these things are, to use the most Java correct language, it's method, not function, but I'm gonna say function. I might say method interchangeably. Those two will mean the same thing, as far as Java is concerned anyway. So I'm gonna take my hello world, and instead of printing hello world in my main, I'm going to move that into a different function. I'll be honest, this is something that's gonna lose a lot of people, like immediately, because it's probably the biggest jump in what the structure of the code is. We had ifs, which was the first time you would have code that doesn't necessarily run every single line from top to bottom, but now we're gonna have code that doesn't start on like line 1 and work its way to the bottom, that it can like go around the program depending on what you tell it to do. I'm gonna create some extra space up here above my main. I'm going to create another function. It's just like main. I'm gonna write public static void, but I will name it something different, because like variables, your functions should have different names. I'm gonna call this function say hello with empty parentheses, so there's no string args here, and then put some empty brackets. Now we have our second function. There's nothing in it yet, but that's what it looks like. Now I'm gonna come down to my main. I'm gonna move this line, the hello world, into the say hello function. So I now have two functions on the screen. I have main, which is empty, and I have say hello, which just has one line in it, system.out.println hello world. And when I run this, nothing happens, which is what we expect. If something is printing when you run it, that means that you do not have this. Now the reason that nothing happens when we run this is because of kind of something I said on day one that didn't really make any sense or have any real meaning at the time, which was the function main is where Java starts running our code. It starts at the first line of main and it goes to the last line of main, the function, not the class. When we run this, it starts on line 7, then it goes to line 8, and we've already hit the end of our program, so nothing happens. If we want to run the code and say hello, we have to explicitly call the function. Call meaning ask it to run or tell it to run. So I say hello, empty parentheses, semicolon, and then I run that. And now it prints hello world again, because the main, like the lowercase m main function, is a special thing to Java that when it starts running, it looks for a function called main to start running your code. If I didn't have a main, like if I misspelled this, let's say I just type like man, because I've seen people do that, you'll get like missing, cannot find symbol or something on main. Main method not found in class. Please define the main method as public static void main string args. It needs to be that way, exactly. But say hello, we could change the name of. That's up to us. So now down here, I'm calling it. So line 7 starts running our code, comes to line 8, sees the say hello. It jumps up to line 3, which is where say hello is defined. We say this is the function definition. Then it runs all the code inside of these two braces, which is just the one line hello world. Then when that's done, it comes back down to main, and then we hit the end of main, so we're done. I could show this a little clearer if I did another system.out.println at the end of the hello world, where I write exiting. And if I run this, now I'll see hello world followed by exiting, because on line 8, I'm calling say hello. So same thing happens. We come up here, we run all the code and say hello. When that function is done, we jump back down to here, and we continue where we left off. So then we go to line 9, we print exiting, and then we leave our function. Why would you use this? Good question. This syntax of identifier, just what we call the name of this thing, an identifier, followed by parentheses like this, that is the function call syntax. This is what all your function calls are going to look like. So is there anything else that we've already written that looks similar to this? Something, and then empty parentheses. Keyboard.nextLine is a function call. You don't want to have to take the code that reads from the keyboard or reads from standard input and gives you a string back. You don't want to have to write that everywhere. So instead, you put it in its little function, you write all the logic that you need to do that in nextLine, and then you just call it in all the different places that you want to read a line of input. Any other things that look like this that we've seen before? We have keyboard.nextLine or scanner.nextLine, keyboard.nextInt, keyboard.nextDouble. Another one that we've seen would be a string.length. So that's a function call that asks the string to give me its length. Another one is system.out.println. That itself is a function call. We're giving println a string and asking it to print this for us. I can also call say hello multiple times. I can see that it'll print now hello world exiting once for each one of these calls. I can also have multiple lines and say hello. I can say, duplicate this, how are you? And that, now we get hello world, how are you? Hello world, how are you? And then exiting. The first time I call say hello, it comes up here, to line 3, then it goes to line 4, prints hello world, then it goes to line 5, prints how are you. Then we're done with that, so we jump back down here where we left off, we come to line 10. It's another call to say hello. So we go back up here to line 3, we run line 4, hello world gets printed over here. Then we run line 5, how are you gets printed over here. And we're done, so we come back to line 10, we hit line 11 where we're just saying print exiting, and that's that exiting, and then your program is done. If I wanted to write a second function that prints goodbye worlds, I could do public static void say goodbye, and then just do a system.out.println goodbye world. If I delete this hello, how are you? I could say hello. I can say goodbye. So if I run this, we're gonna get hello world, goodbye world, and exiting. We have the say hello call, which runs all the code in this function. We have the say goodbye call, which runs all the code in this function, and then we get exiting at the end here. This is how you can not just have programs in real life that are just giant mains. As you might imagine, when you are a real world software developer, you can't just have one main method that's all of your code from start to finish. If you need to do the same thing in 3 different spots, you don't want to just be copy pasting it. You want to put it into a function and then invoke that function or call that function from different places. System.out.println. However that works, we don't really care. We just know that it writes the thing out to the console as we want it to. We don't really care how keyboard.nextInt works. We just care that it gives us an int. The only other thing I think we've seen that we haven't mentioned is string.equals. That's another function call. Now I have 2 functions up here, each of which just does something not terribly interesting. It just prints a line of output. You might look at this and see a goodbye world, a hello world, and an exiting, and you might think it's going to print in that order. The output is different because when we run our code, it doesn't start here and work its way down. It starts here on line 11 on the main function. Like that's where your program begins execution. So since we start here, line 12, we call say hello. So that's why say hello executes at that point. But that's why say hello prints before say goodbye, because we called it first. I could delete the call to say hello, and then we won't see hello world get printed at all. We'll just see goodbye world and exiting. So we show a code that looks like this now. The next thing I want to show you is how you make your functions do different things. So just like we have variables in our main, we want our functions to be able to do different things depending on what you give it. So system.out.println itself is a function, and it prints whatever string we tell it to print. It doesn't just do the same thing every time it runs. So instead of say hello, say goodbye, I'm gonna knock out say goodbye here. You guys can keep it. You can keep say goodbye. I'm just getting rid of it to save space on the board. I am going to write another function called say hello to, like the word to, not the number to. What I want is a function where I can say like say hello to Ryan, say hello to Lauren, say hello to class, say hello to world. I can just write these things like just like I say system.out.println hello world, system.out.println hello Ryan. I'm getting it as I want to be able to call it like this, say hello to Ryan, and I want that to print out hello Ryan. The way I accept that, like I would accept a variable, is something called a parameter or an argument. The actual technical definitions of those things are different, but a lot of people use them to mean the same thing. So if I write say hello to, I want to take a string. The way I take a string is inside of these parentheses, I say just not string brackets, just string name. Then I'm going to say system.out.println hello plus name. Now if I run this, I should see a hello world from the call to say hello, and I see a hello Ryan from the call to say hello to. So the way this works is like a variable assignment. When I say hello to here, this string Ryan gets assigned to name. It's basically on this line saying like string name equals Ryan, because that's what I have here. Then it runs system.out.println hello, comma, space, plus adds that name variable that it took in. So make your code look like this, and then I want you to add a second call to say hello to with a different name. Get something that shows that you can call this function 2 different ways and get 2 different outputs. So my example, I'm going to add another say hello to call where I'm going to say Lauren. So we get hello world, we get hello Ryan, we get hello Lauren. And now we have a function that does different things depending on what you give it. This thing is called a function call. When you are trying to make the function run, it's called a call. So I would say I call say hello, then I call say hello to with Ryan, then I call say hello to with Lauren. We would say that this function has a parameter, has one string parameter, and we could say that this function takes an argument, or I'm passing Ryan as the argument to the function. So when I call it with say hello to Ryan, it'll effectively be saying string name equals Ryan, and then run the function. And then when I say hello to Lauren, again, it's like saying string name equals Lauren, then run the function. I want to touch on something called variable scope. I'm going to change some stuff up here, but I don't want you to follow this part because I'm going to show you just a common mistake I see. Let's say I didn't have this string name argument here. I just said say hello to with parentheses, and I still said hello plus name. It should be pretty obvious here. This isn't going to work because I'm going to get an unknown symbol error because there's no name variable anywhere. Cannot find symbol name. So I might say to myself, I'm going to delete this one. I'll just create a name variable down here, string name equals Ryan. and then I'll call say hello to. And you would think, okay, so it's gonna string name equals Ryan. I see hello plus name. It'll find that name down there. This is a very, very common mistake because of something called variable scope or name scope. So when you have these brackets here, like this opening, or sorry, these braces, this opening curly bracket, that creates a new scope. Any variables you create inside of a scope are not visible to anyone outside of the scope. So this name here is a local variable, we say, to the main function, and no one outside of main can see it. So when I do hello plus name here, it only looks inside of this scope, only looks inside of these two curly brackets for a variable called name. It doesn't see one, doesn't have any variables, doesn't have any parameters by that name, so it's an error. So variables are not visible across functions unless you pass them as arguments. You can have the same variable name in two different functions, and they're just different objects, they're different variables. So I'm gonna reset this to the right way now. This scoping rule also applies to ifs. So if you have like if something brace, and then you create a variable inside of your if, that limited to the if's scope. So you might end up doing something like that without realizing it. If you want a variable inside of the if to be visible outside of the if, you have to declare it outside of the if. Same thing for else. We'll all bang your heads against this for a while. Don't worry. We can also take multiple parameters. I'm going to create a third function called say hello with age. I'm going to say string name int age. Now I have two things. I can say system.out.print line. Who's that? Hello plus name plus UR plus age. I did forget the T in static, thank you. Now if I scroll down to the rest, my main body, if I scroll down to my main body, I can type say hello with age, say hello with age. Here I say Ryan, and I say 26, run that. Hello world, hello Ryan, and now this is the output from the call to say hello with age. So each of those things is passed independently. It's like saying string name equals Ryan, int age equals 26, and then running the code after that. To show an example of a function that maybe does some math, I'm gonna write public static void print squared, which is just gonna take some number, and it's going to print that number squared, so num times num. And then if I call it here print squared with 5, I would expect 25, and then print squared with 4, I expect 16, and we have those two in our output right here. So I pass 5 to print squared, that's what int num is, and then I do num times num, which in the first case is 5 times 5, and I print out the result, 25. Then I call it with 4, so num equals 4, I print out num times num, and we get 16. So you should all have this on your screens. I would like you to write your own function. So I want you to write a function called print sum, which takes two ints and prints the sum of those two. So if I were to call it, I would call it like this. Print sum 167, let's say. And then I would expect this to print out. So I would see a 167 in my output right before exiting. You need to write this function, but make sure you have everything else up here working before you try that. So the way it will be implemented is public static void print sum int num1 comma int num2, because we have two integers we're taking. And then print out the sum of num1 and num2. That's it, semicolon. That's it for real, 167.